everyone for being here at the final Matronage Salon of the 2025 Future Fair. I think it's appropriate that we're reaching way back into the past for this one, and talking a little bit about how to bring historical women artists into the present, into a contemporary moment. I'm so pleased to be with Nicole Shipley, who is producing a documentary on the great Baroque artist Artemisia Gentileschi, and Valerie Harris, who is working on a biography of the Harlem Renaissance painter Laura Wheeler Waring. I wanted to first, actually, I promised, if you follow us on Instagram, I promised a little swag for this final event. So I don't know if you're familiar or use the words like Kafkaesque and Dickensian, these words that describe, not just reference a male artist or writer, but have describe a certain mood or moment. And I was a little confused as to why there weren't any female versions of those types of words. So the title of this panel is Writing Women into Art History. So I've produced these little pencils with women adjectives. So Krasnerist, Callowesque, and Ringoldian. So if anyone would like a pencil, just sort of pass them around, and I will get you one too.
Thank you.
So those are my little presents to say thank you for being here at the Matronage Salon. So I want to start by asking you, yes, we're a panel of 3 people here, but in some ways keeps going out. In some ways we're a panel of 5 people. So yes, please introduce your subjects.
Okay. Hi, I'm Valerie Harris, and I am at work, and it seems like a long time being at work, on a biography of the Harlem Renaissance painter and illustrator, Laura Wheeler Waring. Laura Wheeler Waring has usually been like a footnote in art historical volumes, but recently there's been, she's hot right now. She's having her moment. She's been in 2 shows at the Met within the last 5 years. One was basically on her illustrations. She's in the Transatlantic Modernism show. She's almost like the star of that show. So that's my subject, Laura Wheeler Waring, and we'll talk more about that.
Hi, I'm Nicole Shipley. As Hall said, I've been producing and co-directing a film for the past 3 years or so that we're getting really close to finishing about Artemisia Gentileschi. She's a Baroque painter. She's considered to be like the only female Old Master painter, so at the level of like Caravaggio, Raphael, Da Vinci. And I think her story really is relevant to the experience of the female artist even today. And the film sort of talks about her life, the way she, broke through glass ceilings and obstacles and barriers, really making a name for herself, making more money than her male counterparts. But then why does she ebb and flow throughout history? Why does she kind of go missing at certain points? And then we move through time to focus on the other rock stars of female artists from every era of art history who sort of have had that similar struggle, and land right now and today with the art market and sort of who determines the value of our work, and what are museums doing to, make representation just a little bit more equal.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I guess this will be our
We'll share.
Put that one down. So what initially, I think that when you do work with the work of, or the life of an artist, for 3 years, for significantly longer than 3 years, I think, in your part, you've been writing a blog about Laura Wheeler Waring. You develop a personal relationship with them, as if you know them in some way. So what was it about these individuals that made their lives so compelling that you knew you could dedicate more than a passing, afternoon with a biography?
Go ahead.
All right. For me, I don't come from the art world at all. I very much come from a filmmaking background. And one of my greatest inspirations in the industry is the actress Gina Davis. She's also an incredible activist who's just done studies on gender and racial bias in media and how it's just causing a lot of problems in the world. And I, I went through like this health thing a few years ago, and I just remember my friend being like, "Oh, let's play classical music. It'll make you feel better." And I was like, "Why is it all male composers? Like, I don't want to listen to male energy." And then I started to think about, well, what other parts of like the world are there, like these hidden female talents that I just haven't been exposed to? And I discovered Artemisia's work, and I had never felt so seen, and like the power of the female perspective is something that just stays with you. And then the question of like, why didn't I know her name until now, and so, yeah, I just kept digging and digging, and then I just had to like give myself like a art history education before I felt confident enough to start talking to scholars and actual experts. And then here we are today.
Well, I have done a lot of different projects. I've written plays, I've done a documentary film, and like a lot of creative people, I've had to have a job. Every now and then, I had to have a job. So I had just finished the documentary film, and I was looking for a project, and I was just getting ready to start a job at the University of Pennsylvania, and I said, what project can I do that will be accessible to me, because this is going to be a demanding position I'm getting ready to take. So who would be accessible to me? And I started doing a little, not just research, just thinking about my past. Laura Wheeler Waring had to have a job. She was a painter. She had to have a job. And her job was teaching at this small, historically black college outside of Philadelphia. I went to that college. I graduated from that college. My two sisters graduated from that college. And Laura Wheeler Waring's paintings hung in the library. But nobody ever told us anything about this woman. I had like 3 male art teachers. None of them ever mentioned her. There was a building named after her because she had been teaching there. She had taught there from like 1907 to 1948. So there was a building named after her, and no one ever taught us anything about her. So I was scrolling through the computer looking for what I could do, and I said, I don't want to write about her. Maybe I'll write about Augusta Savage. She seems more like my speed. But then I had a print that fell off the wall at that time, and I felt that it was Laura saying, no, write about me. So that's how I chose her.
I mean, I think that's so, that's fabulous. I think that's so interesting that it is true that the stories of women are often in plain sight. I mean, a building named after her, Artemisis Gentileschi had incredible success during her lifetime. So there are these sort of nefarious, forces that somehow pull them out of the record. So I wonder what, especially because your documentary dives into a lot of this, the question of why this is true. If the art sort of speaks for itself, why do you think that the stories of women have been written and then erased? Or as, I can't remember who said this, but written in invisible ink. I think it's a really good metaphor for what it means to be a woman who lives and then is sort of erased from history.
Yeah, that's been like fascinating to kind of figure out like how has this happened. Right. And I think it just goes back to like a woman's place historically in society. Going back to the Baroque period with Artemisia, I mean, she was lucky that her father was a successful artist, so she was given access that most women just didn't have. It was kind of like Taliban-style rules for women back during that period. You couldn't leave the house without an escort. You couldn't take an apprenticeship. You couldn't get access to education. And there are still so many incredible women artists that I've learned about. I highly recommend researching this exhibit that the Tate Britain did last fall called Now You See Us that was curated by Tabitha Barber. It was 400 years of working female artists who's essentially just been, erased. And a lot of the times what would happen for those women is they would get taken advantage of when they were good enough, and they started to sell their work because to be a woman was just lessen the value of your work. So even if they were able to sell their pieces, a lot of times the dealers would change their signature to a man's signature because they would get a higher price in the art market. And so now there's the organization Save Venice is doing incredible work of x-raying these paintings and recovering the original signatures of these female artists. And so Artemisia was so unique. And I think the reason she's been able to stay a bigger fixture comparatively to a lot of other female artists until we get to abstract expressionism really, is because she did multiple signatures in her paintings. So she would use her face as her own model. So you might be able to take her name off the canvas, but it's going to be really hard for you to say that that's not the same face in all of these other masterpieces. And then, does that answer the question?
Yeah,
okay.
No, very much.
Well, also just women just get erased anyway. One of my most recent blog posts, because I do a blog on Laura Wheeler Waring, and one of the most recent blog posts, I said, who deserves to be remembered? Because I went to the grave site of Laura Wheeler Waring. Laura Wheeler Waring married the man, a little sexually ambiguous man, who was 10 years younger than her. I think that she married him and her nieces, whom I've met, two of her grandnieces I've met. And one of them indicated that Uncle Wally was sexually ambiguous. But I could tell he was very competitive with her. And when I visited her gravesite, all it says on her gravesite is Waring. That's his family's name. It doesn't say anything. If you didn't go to the cemetery records and ask, is she buried there? You would never know she was buried there. So look at all the dates. You could say a woman artist or whatever you would say, and he just buried her, literally buried her in his family's crypt. Now, she had a friend, Jessie Fawcett, a writer of the Harlem Renaissance. Jessie Fawcett is buried in the same cemetery. This is a historic black cemetery outside of Philadelphia. I'm going to be buried there because I want to be buried there. Jessie Fawcett has her dates, her husband's name, her sisters, everybody. It's you can tell this is her. This gives you a lead. This gives you something to go on. But Laura doesn't have that. So there's so many ways, and it's not just the public. It could be a family as well. It's a lot of ways to hide a woman.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I think something else that happens with again, going to a woman's place in society historically is I don't like to vilify men in the art world or in these positions of power, because I think it's in our human nature to uncover stories or be drawn to stories that are natural for us, that we see ourselves in. And now what we're seeing with this shift is as more women rise to positions of power at major institutions or in the education field, they're doing the hard work to uncover the gravesite, to bring these stories to life, because it's they're naturally drawn to these stories. And I think art is all a quest to better understand ourselves and to see ourselves and how we fit into the world.
Yeah. So. No, absolutely. And that actually segues really nicely into my next question, which is about what does, in some cases you have a woman who died many centuries ago, decades ago, in your case, what makes, how do you position their stories in a contemporary way that feels relevant to a contemporary audience? I think in some ways your media is having a blog constantly updated and dynamic in that way, and a documentary film is certainly a contemporary way to reach people. But how do you frame a story that is in some cases centuries old to feel relevant?
I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do. It's sort of what we've been trying to figure out. But I think the most important thing was just being true to what connected me to her so much. And if I could connect a modern young audience or people today to what connected me, then I thought it would work. I think something that was so important when you're dealing with someone who's 400, 500, 400 years away from us is how does their story parallel to other women's struggles, like all the way to now. And there's so many parallels, something that happened to Artemisia. She was like a child prodigy. And in the year 1611, one of these teachers, working on behalf of her father, sexually assaulted her. And she took it to trial and she won the case. And that doesn't happen for women today. And just that story of perseverance, the way she channeled that her recovery, her process into the work she did, it just is something that's so powerful and inspiring, I think, for women right now. And then again, the thread of the constant struggle that we see over and over and over for women artists throughout history. And then how can we hold certain institutions accountable in a way that's not gotcha, but it's just this is what's happening. Are you guys doing anything to rectify this? Yeah.
Well, one of the ways that I'm positioning Laura Wheeler Waring was an early portraitist. In the 1920s, during the Renaissance, she was the Black figurative painter. But look what is happening in art today. Black figurative art is hot. So what I'm doing is positioning her as the forerunner of that. Okay? There's an exhibit over here I was explaining to the salesperson over there. What you're doing here, Laura Wheeler Waring was doing in the 20s, in the teens. The other way I'm making her relevant is how many how many professional young people, women, men, anyway, have a side hustle. So she worked at the school, but her other side hustle was illustration. And she was not crazy about doing illustration, but she did it for the Crises magazine, of which W.E.B. Du Bois was the editor. And there are all these letters of her saying, when are you going to pay me for that one I did before? Every time he would ask her, well, can you do the April cover? She said, I can, but you didn't pay me for what I did before. And look, I can't do this for less than $10 because she heard that he was paying one of the gentlemen, he was paying him $20. So all this evidence is there if you want to look for it. So I think that there's a lot of ways, and I'm still digging on how I will be able to position her. But I do want to say, I'm writing a biography of her, and I was trying to get agents interested in her years ago when I started, in 2012. And I really couldn't get anybody interested. But now the way things have changed, and I feel like I have a different way to position her. I will be talking to some agents and editors at the Biographers Conference in Washington, D.C. next month. And I just have a feeling that I'm going to be able to grab their ear a little bit better now that other things have happened in the art world.
Right. Yeah. And do you ever feel a particular responsibility to tell the story right, or to go above and beyond, or do you feel like you are agents of this person's life and you need to do it in a way that is worthy of them? I mean, is that a burden to carry?
Yes. I mean, going back to what Valerie said about the picture falling, I've had crazy
Tell them, I love
moments. I mean, gosh, I was in Paris at they're doing a big Artemisia Gentileschi exhibit at this beautiful museum called Musée Jacquemart d'André, and we were just there filming, and it was just miraculous because museums are very funny about their rights and reproductions. They have a lot of rules about getting permissions. And like the Met and some major institutions lent, all their Artemisias to this one exhibit, and we got permission from everyone to film it in like another country, which was like insane. But there's this one painting, I think it's probably her most important to her personally, and it's something she painted after her rape, and it's a story called Susanna and the Elders. It's painted, things about Artemisia that I love is she's one of the only women in history to paint like the female perspective of these really famous biblical stories. So like the church was like funding all these artists, male artists, to tell these Bible stories that then they put up in churches all over the world to kind of, create this limited perspective. And she was the only woman that was like, well, I'm going to paint my version. And it's like 1,000 to 1. The 1,000 by men all look really thematically the same. The one by Artemisia is completely different. And so there's the same thing with this Susanna and the Elders. It's a young woman who's about to be like raped by these 2 old men. And she ends up being killed after taking it to trial because they don't believe her. But like Artemisia painted this right after this happened to her. And it's so different than all the other ones because in the male versions, the girl's almost like, what are you doing here? Like, me? Oh my God. And her, you see, in Artemisia's, you see the pain and the horror and the anguish and the stakes of like what's about to happen to this young woman. It's so heavy. So we're staying in this like crappy little hotel by the museum, and there's like, this is the one painting that the museum was like, there's no chance. The family will never let anyone photograph it. They had a security guard during all of the days, like no photography allowed. Like they were like, it's not worth it. Like, good luck, guys. And I was like, I think she would really want me to film this painting. Like, I don't think you understand. And so we go back to our hotel, and we're separating some stuff from the gift shop, and there's this woman with like a nanny, and they're like checking out, and she goes, oh, Artemisia. And I was like, yeah, like, oh, did you guys see the exhibit, or did you go to the opening? And she goes, I own one of the paintings. Mm-hmm. I know, I like could cry. And I did cry. Mm-hmm. She owned the Susanna and the Elders, and it was just such a clear sign, from the universe, from God, from Artemisia, that like, you might be a steward of my painting, but it's still my story. And they gave us permission to film the painting and invited us to their, yeah, it was really crazy. And so, yeah, like I think there's in Hollywood especially, and I'm sure in writing and being a biographer, and you said you're a filmmaker too, you don't own any idea. Mm-hmm. You don't own anyone's story, but I think that you can kind of, the people that get it out there tend to be the ones who hold it as sacred. And like, I said I spent 3 years just like prepping with like different level scholars of Artemisia to get to like the best scholars of Artemisia, because I knew that if I went to them, I wanted to be prepared and like not waste their time. And you just see there's so many different stories out there, and you kind of instinctually feel like this person's the most correct. Right. Like this feels the most authentic. But it's been like the greatest like privilege of my life, like working on this story. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Okay, I think you asked if we feel a responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
When I first started researching Laura Will Waring, I wasn't feeling her. I felt like she was a classist. In fact, my biography is, the working title is Her Best Face Forward, because she was always painting people of a certain class, and I say a life in art among the Black elite. And I was talking to somebody about her, and my friend said, do you like your subject? And I said, and then I realized I was bringing certain biases to the work. And I said, let me dig a little bit more. Let me see some, and good thing that I changed, because that's 2011. This is a long time to be living with somebody that if you don't like them, if you don't see their value and that. I also had the opportunity. I've met 2 of her relatives, and I feel like one of them I just found on the internet, and I emailed her and said, are you related to Laura Will Waring? I would love to, I'm writing a biography of her. And the person said, yes, that was my great aunt. If you would like to come to Chicago, I have a whole box of family memorabilia about her. You're welcome to come and look at it. So I flew out to Chicago to look at it, but it was just she was not interested really. It was like, this is stuff my mom collected. My mom wanted to write about her favorite aunt, and she died. She never got around to it. And you can look at, it was, but she wasn't interested really either. So all these years, I feel a responsibility to myself to do something with all this work I've done and all the things I've learned about this artist. And I think that she would be happy with what we're doing and what I plan to do with her.
Right. And Nicole, what kind of, you talked about, archives, what kind of materials are you working with when it comes to either directly from Artemisia or are there any relatives that you've talked to? Do you have any access to her voice?
Yeah, she was amazing. She loved clothes. We've been able to piece, and it's not just for Artemisia, but it's for some of the other female artists that we cover in the film. She struggled to pay some of her bills. So there was people kind of chasing after her in Florence and different times, which is just, it's hilarious, and you kind of get a sense of who this person is. Plus, during that period, with her trial, the whole thing was transcribed. So we've been able to film those transcripts and have translators and really interesting conversations about just the accurate translation. And then there was just learning about the courthouse, that she did the trial at. There's other archives of other women that took the same person to trial for raping them. And then you go a little bit deeper and you learn that one of those women was actually her model that she used in a lot of her paintings. That she would have paintings of two women. This famous painting, Judith slaying Holofernes. It's Judith and her maidservant. So it's these two women beheading this man and sneaking his head out of a camp. And it was her and her friend who had the same rapist. And so that's been really fascinating. And then, I mentioned that exhibit. Now you see us from the Tate Britain last year. Tabitha Barber had to do a lot of the same work. It's funny because you mentioned how your artists would have to fight to get paid. And you see letters of some of these female artists to they would paint these really beautiful commissions. And then there was this one letter of the man, and he basically called her a whore for asking for money to be paid. And then it was just the shame, it was just okay, fine. Well, what do you think is fair? And so there's a lot of really interesting archival and through letters and people's own stories or struggles that you can kind of gives a lot of context to just the paintings themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And the question was?
Oh, I think you already answered the question. It was really about archives and how.
Okay.
Were there letters from?
In addition to the personal memorabilia, which is, I feel very valuable to me because those are breadcrumbs that you can follow. But she attended the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and so in their archives, there's her enrollment form, and this was in 19. I think she went there from 1908 to 1914 or 1915, and in the archives on her enrollment card, that the enrollment people wrote in red ink, colored. So you can tell how the kind of what she was met with when she was there. And she was the first African American to win the Crescent Travel Scholarship. So she wanted an illustration because in painting the competition was really tough, and people were getting it year after year, and somebody said, you know what, you should try an illustration. And so she tried it in illustration and she got it. But when she went for her summer in Paris, she writes that none of the other women who went associated with her. All of them got to stay at the American Women's Club. They did not accept African Americans at the American Women's Club in Paris, so she couldn't stay there. So she had to find her own way. But the thing, what happened is that World War I broke out. And she had to flee Paris, and it's like they were writing, well, where are the other students? And she couldn't say because they didn't keep in touch with her. But it was in Paris is when she met the writer Jessie Fawcett. Jessie Fawcett, someone has just written a historical fiction about Jessie Fawcett. But that's where she met Jessie Fawcett, who was fluent in French, and that's how they got out of Paris during World War I. Jessie did all the talking, got the documents and all of that. So there are the Pennsylvania Academy archives. Then there are the archives at the Smithsonian, because she was a big prize winner in the during the Harlem Renaissance from the Harmon Foundation. So those documents are there. There are documents in Hartford. She was born in Hartford, Connecticut. So the Hartford State Library has when she graduated from high school. So there are archives all around, and they have been very valuable to me. But I think what I have that other biographers won't have is the family stuff.
Right.
Those things. And the other thing I wanted to say when Nicole was talking about the other scholars on Artemisia, I was also intimidated. I would say, oh, what if one of these academic scholars writes a biography of Laura before I can get mine out? And it took me years to get to the thing that, like Valerie, everybody's going to have their own perspective. What they write has nothing to do with what you write. You can take, they take what they're taking and, what's interesting to them. And I will take what I think is interesting to my audience, because I don't have that art background either. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a person who was determined to be an artist. And even though she was of the upper class of her race, her family did not support that. She had to make her own way. So, there's archives, there's things you can find. And also what I do want to say, don't be intimidated by what you think other scholars. I was on a panel before, I was the only one who doesn't have a PhD. And those kind of things would intimidate me too. Right. But not anymore, because I know what I know, they know what they know, and I'm going to say my perspective.
Right.
Just like to add to that really quickly, and so this goes into what your work is about. The art world seemed so intimidating and scary to me, and I could not have had it was the farthest from the truth. We've worked now with Christie's, I've filmed at the Uffizi, the Pitti Palace, I've worked with the Met, every major institute, and every person that we've experienced has just been come in deeper, come take a closer look, and the push for, to get women buying more art and stuff right now, which is part of what you're doing. I mean, I've met people like Hall, and just it's been this incredible journey. And I think my goal with my film is to show people that, right? To not be afraid or think that this world is so elite, and it's there's so much beauty and a lot of people with the same goals, I think. Yeah.
No, and I think that clearly, in many ways, that art world that is so intimidating has failed. I mean, it hasn't told the stories of these artists. So in some ways, it's well, if they're not going to do it, we do need an outsider who's not playing by these rules that erase women. So you coming in without that perspective, without maybe that baggage, or without that, knowledge of why these people are part of art history, then you can actually shake it up in a way that it really, really needs it. So I appreciate that. And I think maybe my concluding question is, I think clearly you've spoken both about the trials, literal and otherwise, that these artists have gone through. What have they taught you about being a woman or being a human being? What of your subjects how have they had a lasting impression on the way that you live your lives?
I mean, she had audacity. She really, every obstacle she overcame, or she fought so hard. She was going to go down kicking and screaming, So whenever I feel a little bit nervous for a lot of different things, I sort of like, I'm like, Artemisia, like help me, yeah, because she just, I don't know if it was her privilege or what, but she just like would not settle for less than she deserved during her lifetime, and I find that like incredibly inspiring. She retired with a school with mainly male students in Naples, learning under her, making more than the biggest male artists of her day, and just like trying to pull from that strength during times is like really, really helpful, because she lived in a time that was even harder to be a woman than now. And I've just done the same thing with a lot of the other female artists too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would say that art is risky business, and it's not a business for people who are risk adverse. It's not for you. But I also would say what I've learned is that whatever your privilege, everybody has obstacles. Everybody has obstacles. She certainly had her obstacles, even though she had more privilege than a lot of her contemporaries of the day. Sometimes that was held against her. When Alain Locke came out with the whole new Negro thing, in his mind, she was not a new Negro. She was old school, privileged Negro, and she wasn't doing the modernist stuff. But even though now today the Met puts her as one of the early modernists. So everybody has obstacles. And also to examine my own biases when I'm looking at a subject or a potential project, to look at my own biases and what I'm bringing to the project that they don't necessarily need to own.
Amazing. Well, I would love to open it up to any questions from the audience. If you have any questions, go ahead. Yeah. So, Luana.
So I'm curious about the Artemisia
5:15.
project and other women artists. Are these other women that she came across in her travels or her work, or is this part of a larger project?
Larger. So there are a few. Something I think is really cool is the Catholic Church. The first woman to ever get a commission from the Catholic Church was a woman named Lavinia Fontana. Her work is breathtakingly beautiful.
Yeah.
And Artemisia apparently saw her work in the Catholic Church when she was a little girl, and that had like a big influence on her wanting to pursue it. So there's a few cases of women during the time that were maybe contemporaries. We can't necessarily prove it. Some of them we think might have been friends. But really in order to make the film really relevant, I think, her story is even bigger than just her lifetime, right? And that was me and my co-director and our producers really wanted to move through time to today and talk about the other rock stars who just, founders of Impressionism and was it Monet's niece painted the haystacks first, and why don't we know these women names? And then we land sort of in just what's driving all of this? What is the market saying? What are the institutions doing? And sort of where's the positive change happening and what areas need a lot of work? I'm sure. My brain. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. We've looked at so many. With a documentary, you really only have 80 minutes, 90 minutes. And so there's a bunch of different factors that go into the female artists that we are going to, pull up, because we just don't have a lot of time. And, it's got to be commercial. So it's even though there might be debatably better work or things like that, if we don't have enough context around the person, then it might not land with an audience that's probably going to be on their phone part of the time anyway.
Yeah.
It was attributed to Franz Hals for a lot of it was attributed to Franz Hals.
Yeah.
To sell it later after she passed. That's right.
Yeah, the signature thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. My poor brain is I can't remember every name. I'm hard drive.
You asked what is the name of the film?
Yeah.
What is the name of the film?
Gosh, the working title is just Artemisia right now. I don't really think too much about titles until I get the project done.
So wait, when's it supposed to be done? Yeah.
There was one project about Artemisia. I didn't think it was that great. It's also a totally different approach to the story. It's like really, it's called like By Her Hand. It's based on a book. It's like letters. Our film is much more about her impact, her legacy, and other women artists in the world today.
How do we stay informed when both of your projects are released?
How do we stay informed?
How do they follow up?
How do
How do we find your work and make sure we know when the biography comes out?
Well, my website is theharriswrites.com, and if you do a /blog, it'll take you right to the blog. But I do have a couple of cards that I will leave here that has that on it, theharriswrites.com.
And then our plan for the film is we're going to finish production probably in July, go into post-production in the fall, and then we're in early talks with some distributors, streamers, and then we'll do like a traditional festival run. So the earliest the film would come out would be January of next year, but it'll be out in the world next year for sure, and hopefully with like a large distribution partner like Netflix or something. And then my Instagram for my company is called Safe Space .pictures, I think is the Instagram handle, and then we talk about all of our other projects and keep updating people on stuff there too.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for bringing these women into our lives.
Thank you.